Today, I'll be reading the Social Studies Harcourt book, Lesson 4, Chapter 8, page 318. You are there. Today, the Second Continental Congress is meeting in Philadelphia. You and others are waiting for news about the meeting. Several men walk by, and a woman nearly grabs your shoulder. "Look, there's George Washington," she whispers. "Some people say he led us against the British." You try to see what Washington looks like. You wonder what kind of person would lead the fight against the powerful British Army. The Second Continental Congress. News of fighting at Lexington and Concord spread through the colonies. Colonist leaders called for the Second Continental Congress to meet in Philadelphia on May 10, 1775. Its delegates meet at Pennsylvania State House. The delegates were divided about what the colonists should do. Some called for war against the British. Others, such as John Dickson of Pennsylvania, tried to get the group to avoid fighting. By June, Congress agreed that the colonies should prepare for war. Preparing for war. The first step was for Congress to form an army. It was called the Continental Army. Unlike the part-time militias that each of the 13 colonies already had, the Continental Army was mostly made up of full-time soldiers. George Washington was chosen as the Army's commander-in-chief, the leader of all the military forces. John Adams, a delegate from Massachusetts, suggested Washington. Adams chose Washington partly because he had served in the French and Indian War. Adams believed that Washington both understood soldiers and knew how to fight a war. To supply the Continental Army, Congress asked each colony to give money to pay for guns, food, and uniforms. Congress also printed its own paper money, which became known as Continental currency. Congress paid the soldiers in bills called Continentals. Reading check. Cause and effect. What caused Congress to form an army? Some things you might want to know was Continental currency was helped to pay for the Continental Army supplies. So they printed paper money, just like what we have today. The reading check. What caused Congress to form an army? Well, I think it caused an army because Congress formed an army because war was about to start and they needed to get ready. Does that make sense? Let's move on. The Battle of Bunker Hill. The time George Washington was chosen to lead the new Continental Army, the first major battle, the Revolutionary War, had already been fought. The Battle of Bunker Hill took place on June 17, 1775. The battle begins. After sunset on June 16, Colony Commander Israel Putnam and Will Prescott arrived at Breed's Hill. Across Charles River from Boston, they ordered their soldiers to build earthworks, or walls made of earth and stone. These earthworks would help the colonists defend themselves. When British General Thomas Gage learned of this the next day, he sent General William Howe and 2,400 British soldiers to capture Breed's Hill. When the British drew close, the 1,600 colonists began their earthworks, started shooting to save bullets. Putnam shouted, "Don't fire unless you see the whites of their eyes." A fierce fight. Fighting on the hill was much tougher than the British had expected. Twice they were forced back toward the river. In Boston, thousands of people climbed on their roofs to view the fighting. They watched in horror as the nearby city of Charlestown was hit and set on fire by cannon shooting from British ships in the harbor. Back on Breed's Hill, the colonists ran out of ammunition. The British made it over the earthworks and the colonists had to retreat. By early evening, the British had captured Breed's Hill. The battle at Breed's Hill was wrongly named for a nearby Bunker Hill. The British won the battle, but they had suffered heavy losses. More than 1,000 British soldiers had been killed or wounded. About 350 colonists had been killed or wounded. Reading check. Cause and effect. What caused the colonists to retreat from Breed's Hill? Battle of Bunker Hill. Illustration. The first major battle of the Revolutionary War, the Battle of Bunker Hill, was fought on June 1775. Why do you think the colonists chose to build earthworks on top of Breed's Hill? Things you might want to know. What caused the colonists to retreat from Breed's Hill? This is what I think, and remember, this is a reading check. The cause of the colonists retreating at Breed's Hill was they had ran out of ammunition and the British were building earthworms. Now remember, earthworms are little huts made of earth and stone, trying for peace. Although the colonists did not win the Battle of Bunker Hill, they had fought bravely. The British learned that fighting the colonists would not be easy as they had thought. The Olive Branch Petition. On July 5, 1775, Congress sent another petition to King George III because it asked for peace. This petition became known as the Olive Branch Petition. As an olive branch is an ancient symbol of peace. By the time the Olive Branch Petition reached London, it could do little good. The Battle of Bunker Hill had further angered British leaders. King George III promised to do whatever was necessary to crush the colonists' rebellion. Reading check. Cause and effect. Why did the British leader ignore the Olive Branch Petition? Now we will read the biography of Philip Wheatley and the summary on page 322. Summary. This Second Continental Congress formed the Continental Army and made George Washington the commander-in-chief. By the time the Battle of Bunker Hill had been fought, it was the first major battle of the Revolutionary War. Philip Wheatley. A crown, a mansion, and a throne that shines, with gold unfading, Washington be thine. People are sometimes best able to express their feelings in poems, stories, or songs. Philip Wheatley was such a person. Wheatley was one of the best-known poets of her time. She was born in Africa but captured, put on a slave ship, and taken to Massachusetts in 1761. She was about 8 years old. During the same year, she was sold to a Boston family named Wheatley. They gave her their name. The family later helped Phyllis learn to read and write. Wheatley began writing poetry as a teenager. Many of her poems are about events in Boston and her life as an enslaved person. Her first book of poetry was published in 1770, and it became well known in the colonies in Britain. She was the first African-American woman in the colonies to have her writing published. In 1775, Wheatley wrote a poem honoring George Washington for being named commander-in-chief of the Continental Army. The lines above are from that poet. Now these were the lines. A crown, a mansion, and a throne that shines, with gold unfading, Washington be thine. Why character counts. How did Philip Wheatley express her patriotism? Now I will answer the question to how did Philip Wheatley express her patriotism? I answered this Phillips Wheatley expressed her patriotism by writing poems. She also got known as writing poems. She wrote one also about Washington. That's the end of Lesson 4. Now you know the road to war. Like, comment, subscribe. I hope you enjoyed.